There are many things in this life that we want to continue remembering. There's many more that we would love to forget. But September 11th, 2001 will be a day that I will always remember. Many of you, half of you in this room may not even remember. I was not even 5 miles away from when we got the news. But as I said, I was a different man back then. I believe God used that event on September 11th to get our attention. And for a time, it did. As Alan Jackson asked, did you go to church and hold hands with a stranger? And he asked that question because many people decided, man, I need to get up and go to church Sunday. They haven't been to church in their whole life, or haven't been to church in years. So God used that time to get our attention, and He did for a time. But as Martin Luther King Jr. said when Kennedy was assassinated, he told his wife, this is a 10-day nation, and in 10 days, we'll be back to business as usual. And for many of us, it was, but not for me. It was a year of revelation for me. It was a year of realization for me. And it was a year of redemption for me. And I find in the Bible a story of a man who, you may say, had the same experience. So if you have your Bibles this morning, let's look at Isaiah chapter 6. And we're just going to cover the first 9 verses of Isaiah chapter 6. Do we know what the name Isaiah means? It means the Lord or Jehovah is salvation. It's a reminder that the Lord still saves. There's a lot that I can tell you this morning about this prophet Isaiah, but for the sake of time, I'll save that for another day. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. It says, it was in the year that King Uzziah died, that I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above the throne stood seraphim, or mighty angels. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their face, with 2 wings they covered their feet, and with 2 they did fly. And one of the angels cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory. And the posts of the door of the temple were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the whole house was filled with smoke. Isaiah seen the vision here. And when he saw this vision, he goes on to tell us in verse 5, I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. In my eyes they have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Now remember, he just said that this was in the year that King Uzziah died. So when he said, I have seen the King, the Lord of hosts, he's not talking about King Uzziah. He's talking about the King of kings, and the Lord of heaven's armies. That's what the Lord of hosts means. Verse 6, Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal which he had taken off the altar with a pair of tongs. And with the coal he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged or atoned for. And also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Isaiah says, here am I, send me. And the Lord answered and said, go. And I can continue reading this, but you won't like what God has told Isaiah to tell the people. But the point is, God commissioned him to be his spokesman, to speak the word of the Lord. There are certain things that I see in these 9 verses, but I want to focus on what Isaiah saw, what Isaiah heard, what Isaiah said, and what Isaiah received. If you go back to verse 1, what was the first thing that he saw? He saw a throne in heaven. He said it was in the year that King Uzziah died that I saw the Lord sitting on a throne that was high and lifted up. So he saw a heavenly throne. He saw God's throne. He saw the King of Glory's throne. He saw God for who he was. Put yourself in this man's shoes. If Jesus Christ was to walk through that door today, how do you think you would respond? How do I think I would respond? I'd probably drop down like a dead man. In fact, I remember one time, many years ago, in the Chapel of Redemption, we had a lady come. And she's what I would call another prophet of God. And she was speaking that night, and I wanted desperately to hear from God directly to me. Hear God speak directly to me and give me some sort of direction. And when that woman, she would walk back and forth in front of the altar. And when she walked over and got close enough to me, within a distance I could reach out and touch her, it was like I had no control over my body, and I fell face forward into her. And if she was not standing in front of me, I'd hit the floor and busted my nose probably. Why did that happen? It was the power of God that was on this woman's life. The presence of God was in the house, and I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. That doesn't happen. I've been in many churches where people pray that I'd be filled with the Holy Ghost, and I would control myself, keep from falling on the floor, keep from looking like a dummy. Not this day. Isaiah saw heaven's throne. He saw God for who he was. God is holy. You got what he heard the angel say? Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. It's repeated 3 times. And I was studying this weekend for this, and it said that this 3-time repetition could be in reference to the Trinity, and that it may be. But I've also heard it said that when in the Hebrew text a word is repeated twice or 3 times, it's there for emphasis. In other words, God is holy. He's not just holy. He is above and beyond anything that we can fathom, anything we can imagine. He is holy. He is righteous. He's glorious. And he's awesome. When we use the word awesome, what do we mean? Or what do we think when we hear someone say, that was awesome? The King James uses the word terrible in its place because it's trying to make the point that it's so huge, so awesome, so glorious that we can't imagine. earth. The Bible tells us that heaven is God's throne and earth is God's footstool. I have a recliner that I used to have in my house. And I'm here real quickly going to put it back in my house, I hope. But it has a footstool. I can grab a handle and pull it up. And I can recline myself at night. I can kick my feet up and relax. Only my father can sit in it. Or my grandchildren. But I say that to say that God has a footstool as well. In the earth, the place where we dwell is His footstool. I don't know that we can even understand that. I really don't. But Isaiah also saw that God had a robe that filled the temple. What does that mean? He's dragging around the robe. Back in the day, kings, when they go out to war and they defeated another king and took his territory, they would take the king's robe and they would have it stitched to his own robe. And the longer the robe was, what did that mean? The more places that he had conquered, the greater his kingdom was, the larger his kingdom was. Well, how large is God's kingdom? How did Jesus teach us to pray? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And when we say heaven, we mean the heavens. There's galaxies out there that scientists haven't even seen yet. God is ruler over everything in the heavens, in every kingdom on earth. We ask, well, how can that be when so much evil takes place on this earth? Don't be fooled. God's not blind. He sees everything that's going on. And He's going to hold men accountable for it. But Isaiah also saw heaven's choir. He saw the angels singing, holy, holy, holy. This word seraphim means the burning ones, the mighty angels. Think back to the Garden of Eden. When God kicked man and his wife out of the garden, who did He put at the gate of Eden to guard the tree of life? The mighty ones, the burning ones, the flaming swords, the angels that were not just, when we get the picture of a seraphim in our mind, it's of a baby angel. No, these are mighty angels. In fact, they're so mighty and so large, they have 6 wings, and with 2 wings they cover their faces, which makes me think, can they not even look upon the face of God? Why are they covering their faces? With 2 wings they cover their faces. With 2 they cover their feet. As they, when God told Moses on the mountain, take off your shoes because the ground on which you stand is holy ground. The angels, so much holier than we are, and yet they have to cover their faces and their feet. And with 2 wings they fly. They fly back and forth and they call out to one another, holy, holy, holy. I wonder if that's all they ever say, declaring the glory of God. Isaiah saw that the temple was full of smoke. It could have been the smoke of the incense that we read about in the Old Testament. Or it could have been smoke coming from off the altar where the hot coals were at. It was a burning altar in heaven. When we read and study study the Old Testament and sacrifices, we find that's how the sacrifices were offered. An animal was cut apart and laid upon the wood, and they would light the sacrifice on fire. Remember when Abraham took his son Isaac up to the mountain to worship God? And Isaiah says, Isaac says, Father, I see the wood, and I see the knife, but where's the offering, the sacrifice? What did Abraham say? The Lord will provide for himself a sacrifice. And he did, that very day. But what Abraham was saying was also prophetic. God would provide another sacrifice, a sacrifice for our sins, and that would be Jesus Christ. In fact, Matthew Henry, when commenting on this set of verses, Matthew Henry that said that it was Jesus Christ that the prophet Isaiah saw sitting upon the throne in heaven. But Isaiah also saw heaven's door. He said the door in heaven shook when the angels cried out, right? When I hear about the door in heaven, I think of what Jesus said when he said, I am the door. Anyone who tries to come in another way is a thief and a robber. But he also saw heaven's altar. I recommend you go home tonight and read Revelation this week and see how many times the book of Revelation speaks of the altar in heaven. But in this set of verses, it's referred back to Revelation 8 and the altar that was in heaven, and the fire and the coals that were upon the altar. But not only did Isaiah see all that was in heaven, but he saw the King of heaven. He said, I've seen the King, the Lord of heaven's armies. And my eyes have seen the King of kings and the Lord of lords. But Isaiah also heard. Not only did he see, but he heard. He heard the true, or he heard words of true worship. When we come and we worship God, I think how feeble our worship is. Even the songs by what we call professionals are feeble. Modern day worship to me sounds like whining and crying. Some people enjoy it. The truth is, it's so feeble. Is it the music that brings us into worship? I hope not. I think the music is just man's way of trying to tell God how glorious He is, or how feeble we are, and how much we need Him. But the angels in heaven, all they could do when they worshiped God was cry, holy, holy, holy. They were declaring an attribute of God. But Isaiah also heard the words of reconciliation when the angel took the coal and touched his lips. He said, your guilt is removed and your sins are forgiven. They're atoned for. They've been paid for by somebody else. Isaiah heard the words of reconciliation. What did he say before that? Behold, I am undone. The New Living Translation says, I'm doomed. What he's saying is, I have nothing to say. When he's hearing the angels cry, how holy God is, Isaiah says, I have nothing to say. How many of us have ever tried to, or seen someone get up to speak after someone else has spoken? He said, Well, it's kind of hard to follow such words like that. What words can Isaiah speak after hearing the angels declare how holy God is? He says, I am undone. I'm a man of filthy lips, and I dwell amongst people of filthy lips. In other words, I'm scum, and I live among scum. And I look upon God and God's throne, and the comparison is it's like the difference between total blackness and pure whiteness. The difference is so drastic. But he heard the voice of true worship. He heard the voice of reconciliation. He heard the voice of thunder, you might say, when the foundations of the temple shook in heaven because of the sound of the worship that was going on in heaven. How many angels do we think were there? I read one commentator yesterday, he said it was only 2. I was back and I looked, where did he get that from? I don't know. But the phrase, the Lord of heaven's armies, is multitudes upon multitudes upon multitudes of angels. What did Jesus say? I could call 10,000 angels down to deliver me if I wanted. And that was just a portion. So imagine hundreds of thousands of angels declaring, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. Imagine how the foundations would shake and how it would feel like thunder. I remember being out in Missouri when the thunder struck out there, it would shake the whole earth. I don't care where you were, you would feel it. You can't imagine the difference between the thunder out there and the thunder here, or the difference between the thunder in heaven and the thunder on earth. But Isaiah also heard the voice of God. And how did that voice come across? It was a heavenly invitation. He said, I heard the Lord ask, who shall I send and who will go for us? He heard the voice of God. And then when he said, Here, my Lord, what did the Lord say to him? Go. Go. What did Isaiah say during this whole vision? Well, first I find that not only did he see God for who God was, but he saw himself and the world in which he lived for what they were. And he could do nothing else but confess his sins. He was corrupt, he admitted. Living among corrupt people. The New Living Translation says, Then I said, it's all over. I am doomed. I am a sinful man, and I live among sinful people. Yet I have seen the King, the Lord of heaven's armies. He confessed his sin, and he confessed God for who he was. But he also, when given the invitation to be a spokesman for God, he suggested himself. He volunteered, you might say. Here, my Lord, send me. One Bible teacher says that the Hebrew, when you go back to the Hebrew, it's Isaiah saying, "See me, Lord, send me, Lord. I'm here, Lord. Let me go. Let me be the one." And God says, "Yes, go." So what did Isaiah receive on this day? Well, the first thing he received is cleansing. He said one of the angels flew over to him and took a hot coal from off the altar and touched his lips with it. You might ask, well, how does that cleanse anything? I don't know. It's a great mystery. I know that fire purifies. I know that fire cleans. I know that hot water cleans better than cold water, right? So the heat in the fire purifies. I think of a refiner's fire and how it purifies gold and silver. Separates the pure from the impure. The impure comes to the top where it can be seen and can be separated. But Isaiah received cleansing. The angel said, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity or your sin is taken away, and your sin has been atoned for." What does that word atonement mean? Can anyone tell me? It's been paid for by someone else. You didn't pay for it. You didn't earn it. It's been paid for by somebody else. So Isaiah received the cleansing, but he also received the commission. When God said, "Go and speak to the people." As I said in the beginning, I remember that day, September 11, 2001, where I was. Not just physically, where I was at work, but where I was spiritually in my life, which is a whole lot more important than where I was physically. I'm standing in a U-Haul building in shop, but that didn't matter. I was standing around with a bunch of other mechanics, but that didn't matter. What mattered was where I stood in God's eyes. And I was a sinner, just as Isaiah declared he was. Not only was I a sinner, but the people around me were sinners. Many of them. I think only one other guy there at that time was a professing Christian. Truth be told, I was a professing Christian too, but I wasn't a true Christian. I had people fooled. But God saw who I was. God saw the things I did. God saw the people I spoke to, the things I said, the things I did behind other people's backs. God saw it all. God knew it all. And it brought about a realization in my life that if I was to die, just as any one of those 3,000 people died that day when the towers were hit, if I were to die, no matter what I professed to be, no matter what other people thought I was, I knew where I would wind up. And it wouldn't be up there with the angels singing, "Holy, holy, holy." But it was 2 months later that I had to just give up. You see, I can't live this life of deceit any longer. I can't live this life of sin any longer. I can't continue every new year making resolutions, swearing I'll change, swearing I'll overcome this addiction on my own. In fact, what brought about my salvation was a telephone call in which I told someone, "I'm done. It's over. I don't want to see you any longer or anymore. I don't want to speak to you anymore. Whatever we had between us is done. It's over with." Yes, I spoke that with my mouth, but when I hung up the phone, I heard in my mind, "You fool. you know you cannot keep your promise. So I told God that night, I don't have the power to keep my word. I don't have the power to stay away from sin. I've been raised my whole life hearing the word of God. Been raised my whole life being taught the gospel. It's done me no good up until this point. It hasn't become real in my life. So God, if you'll still have mercy on me, you have to give me the power to do what you want me to do. And the following Sunday, that was a Wednesday night, the following Sunday, I went to the altar. And I gave my life to Christ. And God changed me that day, just like He changed Isaiah. God took away 2 different addictions I had at that time in my life. Just took them away. There were other things He could have done that I wish He would have done immediately, but He didn't. But 2 addictions, He took them away. He cleansed me. He purified me. And as time would go on, He called me and commissioned me to speak His word. So I stand before you today wearing this hat because it's a reminder of who I was when I came to see God face to face, and how holy He was and how wretched I was. And I wonder how many people were saved because of what happened September 11th, 2001. And I wonder how many people were heading that direction but decided to turn away. That's been 22 years ago. How many people think, or how many people do you think have died since that time? Just in America. How many of those have died without Christ? You know, there's not a day that goes by that I don't look at the clock. I don't look at a document and the number 9/11 is shown to me multiple times a day. And I ask myself, Lord, why? Why do you keep showing me these numbers? 9/11. And it's as if He says, what do you think of when you hear 9/11? You think of an emergency. In fact, if you was to call 911, what would the response be on the other end of the phone? It would be 911, what's your emergency? The emergency is people are dying and going to hell every single day. And once you draw your last breath, it's over with. It's done. There is no second chance. I had second chance after second chance after second chance all my life. And by the grace of God, I did not totally reject it. But there are those today that will still reject it. And there's nothing we can do for them. But on the flip side, we can't say, well, some people might say, well, God has already chosen whom He will save and whom He's going to send to hell. I don't believe it. The Bible says it's not the will of God that anyone should perish, but that all would come to salvation. Does that mean that all will? But we have a responsibility. When I see those numbers 9-11, I'm reminded of my responsibility. If there's an emergency, people will die, and people will go to hell. And I'm reminded of my commission. Just as Isaiah remembered his commission. And I remember how God told me, if you fail to warn them and they die in their sin, their blood is on your hands. So every time I see 9/11, I think of that. I would hope, and I would love to think that everyone in this building is saved this morning, but I know better. So today is the day. Let it be today, and I promise tomorrow. Let's pray.